Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Iran's new president, comedian Bruce Vilanch, kosher Texas-style barbecue, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Iran has elected a new president, and what that means for Israel, Syria, and the rest of the world is being hotly debated. Hassan Rouhani was elected on June 15th with more than half of the Iranian vote, gaining a clear majority and mandate despite facing off against 5 other candidates. He replaces Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the well-known and highly controversial president who, among other things, suggested Israel should be, quote, wiped off the map, hosted a Holocaust denial conference, aggressively worked to develop his country's nuclear program, and engaged in persistent and fierce violent repression of his political opponents and their constituencies. Rouhani is being described by many as a, quote, moderate, but as we've seen in description of Muslim leaders over the years, that moderate label can mean many things to many people. One of the first issues Rouhani addressed was the country's nuclear development program. Rouhani had led Iran's nuclear negotiating team under former Iranian President Mohammad Khatami during the years 2003 through 2005, a period when the country had agreed to a moratorium on uranium enrichment. At a press conference on Tuesday, Rouhani addressed that period when Iran made such concessions, declaring, quote, "This period is over." Rouhani spoke of Iran's nuclear development in the framework of national rights, saying, quote, "The U.S. should not interfere in our internal affairs, recognize the rights of Iran, including nuclear rights, and stop its unilateral policies and pressure. The next government will not give up the legitimate rights of the country." The interference, unilateral policies, and pressure that Rouhani is presumably referring to in that quote is the aggressive international sanctions program that the U.S. has developed in partnership with the European Union and dozens of other countries and international bodies. But Rouhani suggested that Iran's nuclear development program can be shown to be abiding by international rules, perhaps suggesting that he will claim that the country's nuclear development program is not trying to develop nuclear weapons, and that he will try to justify such a claim with greater transparency. Under his leadership, Iran will be, quote, more transparent to show that its activities fall within the framework of international rules. The idea is to engage in more active negotiations. President Barack Obama, in an interview with Charlie Rose, suggested that proving Iran is engaged in non-weaponized nuclear development could be enough to lift some of the sanctions he's helped to place on Iran, but that he would want to see that progress on Iran's part before making any changes, saying of sanctions, quote,
"Those will not be lifted in the absence of significant steps in showing the international community that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon."
Of course, it is unclear whether Rouhani would even be able to significantly alter Iran's nuclear program, as it is largely overseen by the country's supreme leader, Ali Hosseini Khamenei. For his part, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared, "Let us not delude ourselves. The international community must not be tempted to relax the pressure on Iran to stop its nuclear program." He, Rouhani, still defines the state of Israel as the great Zionist Satan. Moving on to lighter topics, comedian, writer, and performer Bruce Vilanch has definitely been the source of many laughs you've had over the years, even if you didn't know it at the time. He spoke with Meredith Gansman, and here's her report.
Wait till I draw you near.
On stage at the Broadway Cabaret Club 54 Below, the sound is big, boldly belted ballads. And then there's Bruce Vilanch.
Well, basically, I have no act. I've written everybody else's act, from Alba to Zadora. Two acts you want to be remembered for.
Vilanch, who recently performed a one-man show at 54 Below, has been entertaining audiences for over 30 years, performing in Broadway's Hairspray and previously starring as a square on the TV game show Hollywood Squares. But more often than not, his work has been heard and not seen.
And I've written all of those shows that you watch on TV as, guilty pleasures. I mean, all the, the pageants, the contests. I wrote the Miss Black Teenage Utah pageant. The winner was Wheezy from the Jefferson. There are no black teenagers in Utah. They are ushered into Wyoming.
Vilanch also found little Yiddishkeit out west.
It's very strange because you realize that when you're going there, it's sort of like there's always an electric storm when you fly into Utah, and it's like God is saying to you,
you shouldn't be there.
Jew, go home. you have a promised land. This is not it.
But Valanche's Jewish upbringing prepared him to stick it out.
Everybody hates you. No one's going to help you. You have to do it for each other. And so we take care of our own. And I think that's a very important maxim.
From beauty pageants to the Grammys to the Emmys to the Tonys to the Oscars, Valanche has done them all.
The great thing.
And now the man who's written for everybody else has finally written his own show, sharing stories from his own life and the entertainment industry.
What I do is I tell stories in addition to being funny, they have some kind of point to them, or there's some sort of observational quality to them, I suppose, without getting parched like the Negev.
For more from Bruce Valanche, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. How is Yiddish being kept alive? A new documentary answers that question by focusing on performance and other arts. Christian Neaton has that story.
The Yiddish language is surviving through performance, and a new documentary is highlighting 3 performers who are leading the effort to bring Yiddish to audiences around the world. Yiddish, A Tale of Survival, is the work of first-time filmmaker Abigail Hirsch, and she sat down with the Jewish Channel to discuss her film, which had its world premiere this week during the New York City International Film Festival's Israel Film Day. And she explained why performance is key to the survival of Yiddish.
Performance is important because it brings the language and the culture to life, because people can see how real people spoke the language.
A major inspiration for the documentary came when Hirsch attended the Montreal International Yiddish Theater Festival in 2009 and 2011. The festival was organized by Bryna Wasserman, who is the director of the National Yiddish Theater Volksbühne in New York City. Her mother, Dora, founded Montreal's first Yiddish theater, and Bryna became the first subject of Hirsch's film.
Yiddish and Yiddish theater came to me via mother's milk. Being Dora Wasserman's daughter leaves you very few options, except for love of theater, love of beauty, for Yiddish.
She invited Yiddish theater troupes from all over the world, which, who knew there was a Yiddish theater troupe in Poland, in Romania, in Australia, and singers and actors and scholars. They had like a 2-day symposium on Yiddish each time.
One of those performers was Milena Kartovsky and her one-woman cabaret.
I try to rescue a culture which is barely dead in most part of the world.
To hear more from the director of Yiddish, A Tale of Survival, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Finally, many Jews throughout the ages have articulated their desires by calling out to God in Hebrew, beseeching God with the name HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But recently, many who desire authentic Texas-style barbecue have been calling out a different name, HaKadosh Barbecue. Meredith Gansman reports.
It's summertime, it's hot, it's barbecue season. But in New York City, it's not so easy to just fire up a grill. And if you keep kosher, well, that's an even meatier issue. Kosher HaKadosh Barbecue did not so much pop up at this Upper West Side street fair as it did roll in on an 18-foot Texan-made barbecue rig, which can pump out as much as 1,200 to 1,300 pounds of low and slow smoked meats at a time. Pit boss Ari White was raised with kosher barbecue, but it was only available from his own backyard.
Barbecue is definitely totally a part of my family tradition. I'm a third-generation smoker.
And as barbecue is having a moment in New York City, with more and more smokehouses opening for the summer, a new kosher barbecue option might be an even hotter sensation. Since last fall, HaKadosh Barbecue has been smoking. Come rain or come shine, barbecue doesn't cool down for the elements. So it's cooking time for White, a former corporate financier turned caterer, on this cold and wet Thursday in preparation for the weekend rush.
This is where the action's at. Whereby, again, it's providing both the heat and really all of the flavor.
Using oak, Apple and Mesquite Woods, the heat is trapped and has nowhere to go but down the barrels, which is sitting at about 200 degrees, with turkey legs cooking for about 9 hours today.
Beautiful, beautiful turkey legs. And you can see the color's already coming along pretty nicely, even though we're really in just the beginning stages of this. And then they come down. Really the beauty of this is that, this whole method was really created as a method of preservation.
What may not hold is Hakadosh Barbecue's name, which came under consumer fire at a recent pop-up location in Philadelphia and at the Long Island Kosher Barbecue Championship.
Hakadosh is a name of God, and that they thought that I was trivializing Hashem's name, or even more, taking it in vain, or even beyond that, if going for one version of a literal translation, it could be argued that I was saying that barbecue is God. Obviously, that not being our intent here.
For more from Hakadosh Barbecue, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. That's all for this week from all of us here at the Jewish Channel. Be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.